Hi, 1 Hour Smart Home here, and today we're going to show you how to add a three-way switch. So we've got the wiring diagram here for a three-way switch, and if you have an existing light switch, like this one here that's just wired up to a typical light fixture, we're going to show you how you can add the three-way switch so that you'll be able to turn on and off your light switch from more than one location. So we're going to show you first the wiring diagrams for both a typical light switch and for a three-way switch, and then what we're going to do is wire it up here in front of you so you can follow along. So this is the wiring diagram for the light switch that I currently have wired up and a typical wiring circuit for a light fixture or light switch. So what you've got here is your main electrical panel, and from that circuit breaker you're going to have a neutral and a hot wire. The hot wire is then going to go to the switch, the on-off switch like we've got right here. And on one terminal you have the hot wire, and on the other terminal you have what's called a load wire. And that's the wire that will go from the switch to the light fixture. Now the load wire doesn't have current on it until the light switch is on. So right now with the light switch off, there's no current traveling through this load wire. However, the hot wire is the incoming path for current, and once we flip this switch on here, then the current will travel through the load wire up to the light fixture, and then the return path is back to the electrical panel through the neutral wire, which we've got represented here in this gray because you wouldn't be able to see white on a white piece of paper. So that is a typical circuit for a light switch and how a typical light switch is wired. Now, for ease of making the drawing, we didn't show the ground wire on here so it wouldn't make it any more confusing, but the light switch and light fixture should be grounded per code. And the ground wire is typically a green wire or unshielded copper wire, and you're just going to attach it to the ground terminals as required per your local jurisdiction or whatever the code is in your location. So that's the wiring diagram for a typical light switch. Now, if we want to add a three-way switch, we're going to go to that wiring diagram and show you what the difference is here. Now, the difference between a three-way switch and a standard switch is that you are going to have two switches connected that can then either turn on or off the light. So you see we've got one switch over here and another over here. Now typically you'll find these at stairways at the top and the bottom of the stairs, but you can add them anywhere you want to run wiring as long as you follow a wiring diagram similar to this. Now there are multiple ways to wire up a three-way switch. However, when adding a three-way switch, I have found this to be one of the easiest ways to add a three-way light switch. So what we've got is our neutral and hot wire coming from the panel, but where it changes is at the switch. And the first difference that you're going to notice is that on a three-way switch, you have three terminals instead of two terminals. So this is a three-way switch, and we've got extra terminals, this one here, and we've got two other terminals on this side. Now, a typical standard switch is only going to have two terminals. So you're just going to have a hot and a load wire terminal. Now you might say, what's this extra screw? That is the ground screw, and you've got a ground screw on this one as well. So when you have a three-way switch, you're going to have a hot or line terminal, and then you're going to have what are called two traveler terminals, and that's these brass terminals here. And like we showed you on the traditional single pole switch that is not three-way capable, it does not have those extra terminals. It just has two terminals. So that's the first difference with a three-way switch. You have three terminals on each switch, so you're going to need to buy specific three-way light switches. And there are plenty of different brands of three-way light switches you can buy. It really doesn't matter that much which brand you get, but you want to make sure that at the top of the box it says three-way switch, and that when you open it up, it has these three terminals here on it. So now that we know that a three-way switch is different than a standard single pole switch or a standard light switch, let's go through the wiring diagram. So you have your hot and your neutral, which come from the incoming power, And then on the three-way switch, what we've got are these two wires here, which are those traveler wires we talked about earlier. Now, why I've put these lines across these is to designate that these are the traveler wires. In a common practice when wiring up a three-way switch is to use some electrical tape on the traveler wires so that they are designated as a traveler in each junction box and you can identify them. So you just put a little piece of electrical tape on both of these wires in both switch boxes, and it makes it easier to identify them. So the traveler wires are connected to the traveler terminals on each light switch. So you've got one over here going to this traveler terminal, and you've got one over here going to the other traveler terminal. Then the black terminal on the three-way switch down here, we're going to have the line switched going up to the light fixture, and it's going to connect to that load wire that was originally in the junction box here. So what we're going to do is just secure that line switched with the load wire that was in this original switch box, or the old switch box, and just wire them up with a wire nut. So we'll disconnect the load wire right here and we'll leave it free hanging in the box until we secure it with this new line switched black wire coming from the new switch box. So then the current will flow through here, through the light fixture, and back down through the neutral wire. So what you're going to do when you wire up a new three-way switch is match your traveler terminals to the traveler terminals on the new three-way switch, and on the incoming hot line into the first switch, or the old switch box, you're going to put that hot on the black terminal right here, down at the bottom of this particular switch. And then on the new three-way switch you add, that black wire or line switched or hot switched is going to go back up, and it's going to go back into the old switch box, and you connect it to that load wire that you disconnected here in your existing light switch. So now let's go ahead and get started showing you how we're going to wire up this three-way switch and start the wiring process so you can follow along. So in order to wire up the three-way switch, you're going to need a switch that says three-way switch on it with those three terminals like we show here. You're also going to need to have an extra junction box like we've got here, and you're going to need a cover plate as well as some extra wire. Now what we have here is wire with 4 different wires in it. However, when you go to the hardware store to buy this, what it's going to be called is 14-3 or 12-3. And what that designates is that you have 3 conductors plus a ground. So even though it has 4 wires in here, they just label the 3 conductors that you've got. So you've got this white conductor here, you've got this red conductor here, and you have this black conductor here. And you have this ground wire here, which is unshielded, and sometimes it's going to be in green insulation. But it's important to note that you are looking for 14-3 wire or 12-3 wire, because if you get 12-2 wire, it will have 1 less conductor. It won't have this red wire in it. You'll just have wire with the black wire, the white wire, and the ground wire. So when you go to purchase this to add a 3-way switch, you need to make sure that you get the correct wire. So now let's go ahead and get started wiring this up. The first thing that we're going to do is turn the light switch on to the circuit that we're going to be working on. And we do that so that we know the power is on, and then we're going to go down to our circuit breaker and turn off the power at the circuit breaker so that we can work on this while it is not energized and make sure that we are going to be working safely. So what I'm going to do now is go down to the circuit breaker and turn off the circuit. And I'll know the power is off because the light fixture will then be turned off and no longer powered. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, we turn the power off at the circuit breaker, and we can see that our light fixture has gone off and there is no longer power to this light switch. So now what we're going to do is remove the 2 screws that hold the cover plate on. So once you take the cover plate off, it's a good idea to double check with a non-contact voltage meter that there is no power on this light switch. So we've got one here and the lights are not lighting up and there are no beeps. So we can confirm that there is no power on this light switch. You never want to work on a light switch or electrical circuit while there is live power, because you could potentially get shocked. So now that we've confirmed there's no power on this, let's go ahead and remove the 2 screws that hold this to the junction box. Now that we have the screws removed holding the light switch to the junction box, let's go ahead and pull it out so we can work on it and see the wiring a little bit better here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just go ahead and remove the electrical tape from the existing light switch. Now that we have the light switch out and the wiring accessible, what we need to do is identify what wires go where, which one is the hot, which one is the load, and which one is the neutral. So we've got our wires here and we can see that what we've got is 2 wires coming off of the existing switch and a ground wire. Now I've got this bundle of wires right here and this is the hot wire and that is the incoming power to this particular light switch. So it goes from this bundle of wires right here, so it goes into the switch, and when I have the switch on, the electricity can then flow through this wire, which is outgoing upwards towards the light fixture. Now, it's typically the case that the load wire will be going out the top of the existing electrical junction box. However, that is not always the case. You need to be able to identify which wire is your hot wire and which wire is your load wire to properly wire up a 3-way switch. So there are a couple of ways to do that, and we'll include a link below to another video that shows you how you can identify wires if you are uncertain if they are hot, a load, or a neutral wire. Now we can also see this white wire here. That is our neutral wire bundle, so we aren't going to need to do anything with that. What you should do here before you do anything is go ahead and take a picture of the wiring, and if you can, mark it in some way so that you know what was connected where if you ever need to refer back to it. So let's go ahead and remove the wires from the existing light switch. So what I've got here, this is my incoming hot wire. This is my outgoing load wire over here on the right. This is my ground wire, and this is my neutral wire. Now we're ready to start wiring up the other 3-way switch and switch box. So what you're gonna need to do is just knock out one of these knockouts on the switch box so that you can run wire from this switch box to wherever location you are adding the 3-way switch. So there are a lot of different methodologies you can use to get wire from one box to the other, behind a wall or underneath a floor, but you sometimes will need to be creative on how you get the wire from point A to point B, and you may need to open up drywall or drill through a stud to be able to get the wire from this junction box to the other junction box. So now you would take your wire and you would run it from this box to this box. Now I've already got it stripped, but you typically don't want to do that while you're trying to pull wire because it will be difficult and get snagged up on things behind your walls if you're pulling it through a wall. Now if you've got drywall open, no big deal, pretty easy to run the wire. But typically it's much easier to pull the wire if it hasn't been stripped. So now we're going to knock out one hole on this junction box here, and we're going to knock out this remaining knockout on this junction box, and then we're going to take this wire and run it between the 2 junction boxes. Now we've got our 14 gauge 3 wiring run to each junction box. What we're going to do now is strip the appropriate amount off each of these wires in each junction box, and then we're going to attach the three-way switch on this side, and then we'll attach this three-way switch in here. So on the switch, there is a strip gauge right there. You can use that if you are going to backwire these, or if you are going to make a hook and then attach them to the terminals. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to strip each one of these. Now that we have the wires stripped, we're going to connect them to the three-way switch right here. Now, since we are using in this bundle this white wire here as a traveler wire and this red wire here as a traveler wire, it's a good idea to take some electrical tape and designate and mark them so that we know that those are the three-way switch traveler wires. Now, ideally, if you have multiple colors of electrical tape, that's going to be best, but we've got black here, so we're going to mark it in this new junction box, and we're going to mark it in the old junction box on this white wire here that we're adding and this red wire here that we're adding as well. Now that we've got the wires marked, we're ready to wire up the three-way switch. So we want to be consistent with each three-way switch and make sure that we wire it up the same way. So the black wire is going to go on the black terminal. And then I'm going to put this white wire here that I have marked as a traveler on the terminal above that. And I need to be consistent and do that for each three-way switch on the same side with the same terminals. And then on this side, I'm going to put this red wire right here that's marked as a traveler. So we're going to have the red wire on its own on one side of each three-way switch, and then on the other side, we're going to have the black wire and the white wire that's marked as a traveler wire. So as a quick reference here, we've got the three-way switch wiring diagram here that's going to show you how this all gets wired up. So go ahead, pause this if you need to, and you can see we have the black and the white wire on one side, and we have the red traveler wire on the other side. And these designations are the designations that we've marked these as traveler wires, even though it is a white wire and a red wire in practice. Then that black wire or line switched is going to connect to the existing load wire in this existing light switch, which is this wire right here. So this load wire will eventually connect to the line switched wire right here using a wire nut like so. So let's wire up this light switch over here, and then we'll install this one. All right, we have all the wires wired up here. We've got our traveler wire on this side. We have our ground wire here wired up as well. And then on the other side of the switch, we wired up our traveler here at the top that's designated with that tape marking, and we've got our line switched or hot switched wire here. Now, it's always a good idea to take some electrical tape and cover up the terminals on the switch to prevent the possibility of them touching another wire and shorting out. So now we're ready to secure the light switch to the junction box. We can go ahead and install the light switch cover plate also. Now we're ready to move over to the old switch box. So the first thing that I'm going to do to eliminate confusion is get the load wire in the existing switch box, and that's that load wire that goes up to the light switch. And we're just going to straighten out the hook on that one here. so that we can connect it to our line switched wire that is coming from this three-way switch over here. And then we're just gonna connect these two with a wire nut. So the load wire is the one that goes up to the light fixture, and this line switched is the black wire coming from the three-way switch. And here's the wiring diagram if you want to see it one more time. So we're connecting these two wires right here first so that we can then go ahead and connect the rest of the three-way switch wiring and make it a little bit easier to understand which wire goes where when we wire up the second three-way switch. So I take a wire nut and just wire these two together. Now we have the remaining wires to wire up. This is the incoming hot from the circuit breaker or the main electrical panel here. We have our two traveler wires right here, and we have the ground wire from this new three-way switch. So what I'm going to do first is connect this ground wire to the bundle of ground wires that are already in this switch box. And then we have this extra ground wire extension that will connect to the light switch right here. So we're going to go ahead and do that first. Now we have our ground wires secured, so let's go ahead and push that back into the box. Now let's wire up the three-way switch in the existing electrical junction box. So I'm going to take my black wire and connect it to the black terminal on the bottom of this three-way switch. Now we need to follow suit with how we wired up the traveler wires in this three-way switch. So we're going to put our white traveler wire on the same side as the black wire, just like we did in this three-way switch. Now we have our other red traveler wire, and we're going to put that on the other side of the three-way switch. Now we take our ground wire and secure it here. Now it's always a good idea to take some electrical tape and cover up the terminals on the switch to prevent the possibility of them touching another wire and shorting out. Now we're ready to install this light switch back into the junction box and secure it with the two screws to the junction box. Now we're ready to reinstall the cover plate. Now we've completed all the wiring for the three-way switch, so let's go ahead, restore the power at the circuit breaker and test it out. So we restored the power at the circuit breaker and you can see that the light came on. So let's go ahead and test out the three-way switch. If we turn it off on that side, then the light switch goes off. Let's go ahead and see if we can turn it on this side. Yes, we can, and if we want to turn it back on, we can do so over here. So that is how you add a three-way switch, and then you can turn it on or off from either one of these light switches. We're going to do another video that shows you how to add a three-way smart switch, but if you want to refer back to the wiring diagrams, we'll include just a moment here so you can pause and take a picture of these if you need these to refer back to while you are trying to wire up your three-way switch. And here's a picture of the existing light switch wiring, which is how this existing light switch was wired up before. So thank you for watching this video on how to add a three-way switch or how to wire up a three-way switch. Please give us that thumbs up, subscribe, or click any of the links below if you want to support us. Thank you.